From Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana, Siddiqui. First, the headlines. Ahmaud Arbery's killers found guilty on all counts. Putin calls Ukraine a fiction as Russian troops move in. Hindu militia attacks Muslims and police in a Karnataka town. Church leaders in Jerusalem urge Israel to halt land confiscation. Iran hails progress in nuclear talks, but RAISI insists U.S. sanctions must end. More than 75 mosques in Belgium not recognized. New study finds stand your ground laws linked to 11% spike in U.S. gun homicides. Our top story tonight. Ahmaud Arbery's killers have been found guilty of federal hate crime charges for violating Arbery's civil rights and targeting him because he was black. Gregory and Travis McMichael and William Roddy Bryan killed Ahmaud Arbery 2 years ago on February 23rd in the Satilla Shores neighborhood outside Brunswick, Georgia. Speaking outside the courthouse after the verdict was announced, Wanda Cooper-Jones, mother of Arbery, called out the U.S. Department of Justice for originally agreeing to accept a plea deal from her son's killers in federal court. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland spoke to the press following today's verdict. Garland said that Arbery was targeted, chased, shot, and killed by the three men charged in this case while he was running on a public street. Ahmaud Arbery's murder has taken Muslim Americans to a part of their history which goes back to the 18th century. Let's find out why in this report by Saleha Farouk.
Ahmaud Arbery was murdered on February 23, 2020. Ahmaud, or Ahmed, is an Arabic word meaning most praiseworthy. It was one of the names of the Prophet Muhammad, God's peace and blessings be upon him. The convicted killers of Ahmaud Arbery, three white males descended from those who fought for Confederacy. Ahmaud, on the other hand, was a direct descendant of BILALI Muhammad. This is the story of BILALI Muhammad. Ahmaud's ancestor BILALI Muhammad was born in 1770, where Mansa Musa's Mali Empire had once stood. It was a seat of great Islamic and African civilization. Timbuktu in Mali still has hundreds and thousands of manuscripts in its libraries. He was from the Fulani tribe of Africa, which is known for its Islam. BILALI Muhammad was a teenager when he was captured and brought to America as a slave. While enslaved on the rice plantations of Sapelo Island in Georgia, he started rebuilding his life. BILALI Muhammad used his faith in Allah, the God Almighty, to turn his pain into power. He practiced Islam on the island, establishing perhaps the first Muslim community in America. He became an imam to other Muslims enslaved on the island. He eventually rose to become the main leader of Sapelo Island in the absence of a pragmatic slave owner. His education, his mastery of languages, and his rice cultivation skills all helped him protect slaves he led. He also wrote a 13-page book about the basics of Islam. This book is now held at the Hagrit Rare Book and Manuscript Library at the University of Georgia. He probably wrote the book for his children. As common with the Fulani Africans, Muhammad and his wife Phoebe had many children, 12 sons and 7 daughters. He knew Arabic, English, French, and their Fula language. The book, written in Arabic, is a sort of living Islam 101. Basics of faith, methods and rules of ablution and prayer. The slave owner trusted BILALI Muhammad enough to let him build a mosque on the island. Today, a church stands in Sapelo Island, Georgia. Curiously, it faces east and they call it a prayer house. Men sitting on one side and women sitting on the other. It is led by one of the descendants of BILALI Muhammad. It also has old graves facing Mecca, although BILALI Muhammad's grave is not found. This is the story of Ahmaud's ancestor BILALI Muhammad. May Allah bless our brother in faith. May he be in the best place in Jannah, in gardens with flowing water, where he will roam free, free forever, forever salam, in peace with peace.
Pennsylvania firefighters were caught mocking an 8-year-old black girl killed by police last month. That's led to some members of the department being placed on administrative suspension. Members of Briarcliff Fire Company in Delaware County were suspended during a closed-door meeting at the station Thursday night, according to Philadelphia's ABC Channel 6. The fire company was temporarily shut down by Darby Township commissioners after the audio surfaced earlier this month. A Channel 6 crew was not allowed inside Thursday's meeting, so some attendees hopped fences to avoid cameras. Several attendees shielded their faces and others declined to speak about the gathering, the station said. Researchers say state-level stand-your-ground laws should be reconsidered to prevent unnecessary violent deaths. Such laws are associated with hundreds of additional homicides each year in the U.S., according to new research by public health scholars. The study was published Monday in JAMA Network Open, a peer-reviewed medical journal. It compares homicide trends in roughly 24 states with stand-your-ground laws between 2000 and 2016. It also examined patterns from 18 states that didn't have such laws during the study period. Researchers found stand-your-ground laws were associated with an 8% to 11% national increase in monthly firearm homicide rates, causing 58 to 72 more deaths per month. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday recognized the independence of 2 separatist regions in eastern Ukraine. Putin said the West spat on Russia's security concerns for years by moving NATO eastwards and putting military infrastructure closer to Russia's borders. President Biden, in response, announced sanctions against 2 financial institutions, Russian sovereign debt and on Russian elites and their family members. He also signed an executive order barring new investment, trade, and financing to, from, or in Ukraine's breakaway Donetsk and Luhansk regions. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz halted the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline project on Tuesday in response to the Russian move. It was designed to bring more Russian gas to Germany. The UN said it considers Russia's decision to recognize Ukraine's breakaway regions a violation of Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. The Indian state where Muslim girls with hijab are being banned from entering schools has now turned violent against Muslims. On Sunday, at least 20 people were injured and around 50 vehicles torched during a funeral procession. A Hindu extremist who police say was an active Bajrang Dal militia member was involved in attacks targeting Muslims in the area. Journalist C.J. Worldman, a correspondent for Byline Times, tweeted that the man was a terrorist who killed many in Tripura. The U.S. government identified Bajrang Dal as a youth wing of a militant religious outfit. The Home Minister responsible for the hijab ban attended the funeral of the Hindu militiaman. Indian media also reports that the deceased had 5 police cases against him. The RSS militia called Bajrang Dal then organized more attacks on Muslim-owned homes, businesses, and vehicles. They also set fire to police cars. Leaders of Jerusalem churches on Monday warned of an Israeli plan to confiscate church-owned lands in the occupied city. In a February 18th letter to Israeli Environmental Protection Minister Tamar Zandberg, they called for halting a plan to expand an Israeli park to the Olive Mount in East Jerusalem. The letter was signed by leaders of Greek Orthodox, Catholic, and Armenian churches. They say the Olive Mount is one of the sacred places in Christianity. It hosts holy sites visited by millions of Christians worldwide. Copies of the letter were also sent to the consuls general of Turkey, France, Italy, Greece, Spain, and Sweden in Jerusalem. We're bringing more news stories after the break, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Friends, our world is pulling together like never before. We're making huge sacrifices to keep one another safe. Scientists are working non-stop to develop COVID-19 vaccines and treatments. A vaccine will get our economies moving. It will tell our loved ones we're safe again. But we have challenges we must address. Right now, huge pharmaceutical companies are keeping the vaccine research a secret. They're deciding how many vaccines get made, how much to charge for them, and who gets vaccinated. This will no doubt leave billions of people behind. Pharma companies are putting profit, not people, first. Yet, billions of dollars of taxpayers' money is funding their work. We cannot let the CEOs of a handful of pharmaceutical companies decide our future. We need a vaccine that everyone can have free of charge, no matter where you live or whether you're rich or you're poor. We need companies to share all their research so we can make enough safe vaccines for everyone. We need a vaccine owned by all of us. To end this COVID-19 pandemic, we need to pull together once more.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban, or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. So rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks? Racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime. And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
A total of 750 tons of emergency relief goods sent by a charity train from Turkey to Afghanistan was delivered to Kabul on Monday. Medical aid packages were delivered to the health ministry of the interim Afghan administration in a ceremony. It was coordinated by Turkey's state-run disaster and emergency management presidency and with the support of Turkish NGOs. Attendees included Imre Manaf, counselor at the Turkish embassy in Kabul, Taliban's deputy health minister Habibullah Akhundzadeh, and representatives of Turkish institutions. Manov said the various aid materials on the train will be delivered to 34 provinces, reaching people in every corner of Afghanistan. Aid packages include food, winter clothing, medical supplies, wheelchairs, toys, and health supplies. Pakistan is under fire for toughening its controversial cybercrime law. It allows anyone to file a complaint against people posting fake news on Twitter and Facebook and increases the prison term from 3 to 5 years for those found guilty. Changes to the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act were introduced Sunday through a presidential ordinance or decree. They have made spreading fake news or defaming any person or state institution online an offense for which there is no bail. Political opponents and free speech advocates have denounced the move by Prime Minister Imran Khan's government as an attempt to stifle freedom of expression. The criminal defamation law was originally enacted in 2016 by former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's government. It was harshly criticized then as an assault on dissent and political rivals. Ghanaian football star ABDUL WARIS, the Racing Strasbourg forward, is funding a mosque project in his Ghanaian hometown. The Twitter page of the Players Foundation shared photos of the mosque that showed work on the project is moving forward successfully. The two-story mosque is under construction in the Lama Shigu community in Tomoli, in the northern region of Ghana, where Waris was born. The 30-year-old plays for the League One side of Racing Strasbourg. He has been featured 16 times in all competitions for the league. Iran signaled significant progress Monday in talks on reviving a stalled accord on its nuclear program. But President Ibrahim Raisi, on his first visit to a Gulf state, insisted Washington must lift its crippling sanctions on Iran. The country's president is a personal target of United States sanctions. RAISI spoke out ahead of a summit of natural gas exporting nations in Qatar. The summit will take place against the backdrop of mounting tensions in Ukraine. Efforts are being made to restore a 2015 deal limiting Iran's nuclear program. The U.S. withdrew from the nuclear accord in 2018 under former President Donald Trump, who thought it wasn't tough enough in curtailing Iran's weapons ambitions. Burma on Monday urged the UN's highest court to drop a genocide case brought against it by the Gambia for alleged persecution of Rohingya Muslims. Gambia dragged Burma before the International Court of Justice in 2019. The Buddhist-majority country is accused of genocide against the Rohingya Muslim minority after a bloody 2017 military crackdown. When the case opened in December 2019, Aung San Suu Kyi represented Burma at the Hague-based court. She was ousted as the country's civilian leader in a military coup last year. The Nobel Peace Laureate faced criticism from rights groups for her involvement in the case. She is now under house arrest and on trial by the same generals she defended in The Hague. University students whose peers were killed in a rocket attack by the YPG PKK terrorist group last week in northwestern Syria want the perpetrators held accountable. The terror group has recently increased its attacks on civilians, disrupting security in the safe zones of northern Syria. On February 15th, 4 people, including 2 students from Aleppo University, were killed in a rocket attack in the opposition-held Azaz district. At least 12 more people were injured in the town, which was hit by rockets fired from Tal Rifat, a neighboring city. Imad Kenan, a lecturer at the university, said he is shaken by the death of students. The YPG PKK occupies roughly a third of Syria's territory with U.S. support. Since 2016, terrorists have killed hundreds of people, particularly by targeting hospitals, schools, and densely populated civilian areas in their attacks. More than 75 mosques in Flanders, Belgium, have been awaiting recognition they applied for nearly 3 years ago, Flemish Minister of Coexistence Bart Somers said. In Belgium, the federal government determines which religions are recognized. However, the regions are in charge of recognizing local religious communities. Flanders has roughly 1,700 local religious communities, of which more than 1,500 are Roman Catholic. Belgium's Federal Justice Minister Vincent van Quickenborne plans to revoke the recognition and funding of the Muslim executive after suspicion of foreign influence and radicalism. The last Belgian mosque was recognized almost 10 years ago in 2013. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
I am what hunger looks like in America.
I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school. Because this may be the last time I'll have lunch. Till September.
I am a single father of 2 who works 3 part-time jobs, and that's still not enough to put food on the table. I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear. needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. February is Black History Month, and there is a debate going on about teaching critical race theory in school. To discuss this in detail, let's go to Edward Ahmed Mitchell. Over to you, Edward.
Thank you so much, Samana. Greatly appreciate it. We now move to the discussion of Black History Month. Right now, it is the month of February, as you all know. We're nearing the end of the month, and we want to reflect on what this month means to our country, to the Black community, and also in particular to the Muslim community. And we also want to discuss current events, including the debate about critical race theory. To discuss these issues, I'm very happy to welcome on today's special guest, Dr. KADIR ABDUS-SABUR, a PhD, and I'm going to tell you a bit about him after he joins us. Assalamu alaikum, doctor. How are you?
Fine, alhamdulillah. How are you?
I'm very good, alhamdulillah. It's good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. If I may briefly tell our audience a bit about you, and then we'll dive into the discussion. So Dr. ABDUS-SABUR served 4 years in the U.S. Marine Corps during the Vietnam War. And after that, he earned a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Temple University and a master's degree in Islamic education from the Muslim Teachers College and a PhD in social foundations of education from the University of Virginia. In his religious community, he has served as the resident imam at 3 locations: Masjid Bilal in Richmond, Virginia, the Islamic Center of Farmville, Virginia, and the Muslim Teachers College in Randolph, Virginia. He was later elected General Secretary of the Islamic Center of Virginia and served in that capacity for 2 years. In other words, alhamdulillah, this brother is a treasure to not only the American Muslim community, but the American community at large. Has served this country and served this community for many years. Doctor, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Jazakallah khairan. First, tell us, how are you doing? Staying safe? How's your family?
Fine, praise Allah. Thank you very much, brother Edward. We're doing fine down here in Virginia, enjoying our farm.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. Hopefully it's peaceful compared to what's happening in so many other parts of the country. So, doctor, let me first ask you this question. So as we think about Black History Month, why would you say this month is important to our country? Not only the students in school who are going to learn about it, but to our country in general. Why is it so important for us to continue observing and participating in Black History Month?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Brother Edward. When Carter G. Woodson went to Chicago in 1915 and actually initiated the Association for the Study of, at that time it was Negro Life and History. From that effort, Black History Weeks began in 1926. And then in around 1970, then Black History Week became Black History Month. And every president since then has always had a proclamation on the beginning of Black History Month, telling all Americans the importance of this month in understanding the contributions of the African American to America. So it's really been at the forefront of all the presidents, or every president, even including the last one, believe it or not. They all made positive comments about Black History Month and how it did positively impact on American life.
So, doctor, now as we look to the present day, I'm sure you've noticed there's this intense debate going on in local school boards, local schools, about what can and cannot be taught to students about this country's history, about racism, about slavery, segregation, Jim Crow. Before we even get into the debate about critical race theory, do you think that for the most part, schools across America right now are providing a proper education to students about Black history, and in particular about the history of racism and the struggle against racism in this country?
A proper education, and that's something we probably have to define what we mean by proper education. I think actually, if we look at the history of education in America, we'll discover some very interesting things. Number one is that throughout the history of education in America, if we go all the way back to the 1600s and in the 1700s, when schools first started, there was a real emphasis on the importance of religion as a part of instruction. all one has to do is look at some of those early books like the New England Primer and see the influence of Christianity in those textbooks. So education in the very beginning was accented by the importance of religion. Now, what's happened through the years as that religion has become a side issue, and eventually it has become, completely removed from the public education sector. So when we talk about what's the best, most appropriate kind of education in America, or how we can provide the best education possible, I would think that we have to really consider the issue of religion in school. We have to find a way to teach moral values and standards in the school setting. So in that regard, there's a lot of work that can be done. In terms of academic content, though, we find that American schools, particularly post-secondary schools, lead the world in terms of the academic prowess and research and so on. K-12 schools are not in the top, but they're very close to the top.
So, Doctor, let me ask you this, following up on that. What do you think about the way we're teaching, in particular, Black African-American history and issues of racism? Do you think that we're also good at that? We're not, obviously, as you just noted, in terms of the world, we're not at the top. But do you think that what we're doing right now in terms of teaching our kids in elementary, middle, high school is effective right now in terms of making sure that people are entering society with a proper understanding, well, not a proper, but a full and extensive understanding of American history, in particular, the contributions of African Americans to history and the struggles that African Americans have experienced in this country? Do you think the school system right now is doing an effective job of that sort of education?
Generally, they're not. Generally, the large contributions of African Americans have been excluded from textbooks, or it's been either overlooked or excluded altogether or played down. In certain segments of the country, however, there is a prominent place for African American history. For example, here in Virginia, years ago, not so much now, but years ago, African American history was a very prominent part of K-12 education. I went to school in Philadelphia, and we didn't have any African American education in history when I was coming along. And today, with the emphasis on trying to eliminate all reference to the contributions of African Americans as a people being excluded from education, there's a lot of work to be done. So I would have to say no, that there's a lot more work that needs to be done in order to bring out an equitable presentation of American history that includes African Americans.
So then, Doctor, that begs my next question. So this debate about critical race theory and efforts at the local school board level to ban critical race theory from schools. Now, we should know, first of all, that academics have repeatedly noted that CRT is not actually being taught in grade school. This is an academic level, graduate level course of study. It's not being taught to elementary school students or middle school students or even high school students. Nonetheless, you have seen this effort in numerous states to pass laws that would restrict and severely limit what teachers can share about American history, what they can say about and teach about racism. And in some cases, the laws are vague. So it's just opening the door up for parents to complain if they don't like what a teacher is sharing about history. Have you been following this debate? What are your thoughts on this whole debate about CRT in schools and these attempts to restrict what's being taught in schools?
Well, this is a very important issue because there's a lot of things going on here. I think the easiest way to understand it is to really understand what's meant by critical race theory. When we talk about a critical, today in education, we talk about critical thinking skills. And what does that actually mean? What we're talking about is to be able to analyze a situation or circumstance based on facts, based on an analysis, a serious analysis based on facts. So when we talk about critical thinking skills, which we try to teach students, it's beyond rote memorization. It's beyond things taught in the affective domain. Now, what I mean here is that in public education, we have a tendency to view things in either the affective domain or the cognitive domain. Now, the affective domain means that things are taught in a way that the student feels good about it. The cognitive domain means that things are taught in a way that students have to think about it and analyze it and really look into it and look at it in depth. So when we talk about critical race theory, just like it began 40 years ago with David Bell and others, what these scholars did is they actually looked at the climate in which we find Americans living and look at some of the things that have led to the social and economic partitioning of blacks, right? And analyze it very critically and say, hey, you know what, when this is based on legislation, this is based not so much on, what black people did, African Americans did. This is based on a people's perception of black people. And we're going to put this in law. That's why we have things like redlining, where people couldn't buy, banks wouldn't loan money to African Americans. Well, this is what critical thinking does. You analyze something critically. Now, on the other side of that, we have what makes you feel good, the affective domain. I was teaching at a university here in Virginia, and I was teaching the same topic. And towards the end of the semester, I had a white student come up to me and say, Professor, when I really think about the things that we're studying in this class, it makes me ashamed to be white. And right there, is the problem, because what's happening is that people who don't understand what critical race theory means, they're taking it as an emotional thing. And it's, they're talking about racism. They're black too. They say we did it, and I can't have my child sit in school and say things that are going to upset them, because the history is disquieting. It's very upsetting. So on the one hand, you have a true critical race theory, which analyzes the circumstances surrounding conditions, the social, economic, and political partitioning in the country. And on the other hand, you have people who want to use that as an opportunity to stop any recognition or identification of contributions of African Americans, and at the same time, disregard anything in the history that's unpleasant to them that they don't want to hear about. They don't want to hear about the lynchings. They don't want to understand how African Americans were abused, and they don't want to know all the things that would upset them in their moral consciousness, in their moral dimension. Those things are fighting, so they don't want to understand it. They don't want that.
So it's an emotional thing. I mean, I think you made a very good point there, Doctor, that for many people, when they even hear about racism being taught, whether it's parents or students, some of them think that someone's saying something bad about them just because their ancestors are white, which is not what's being taught, not what's being said. There are some teachings about how people today, black people have been disadvantaged by what happened to their ancestors, and how some white people are at an economic advantage because of what their ancestors did. But that's still not a condemnation of any person, and that's not the point of any of these areas of study. But again, the more important point is that this is not being taught. This academic study that you just outlined very eloquently is not being taught in grade school, where people are trying to fight to limit this. So, Doctor, what would your advice be to, you're an educator, what would your advice, and a religious leader, what would your advice be to teachers, librarians, superintendents who are trying to make sure they're educating their kids and also not being a magnet for hatred and for threatening behavior? How do they balance the what's going on, what they're facing?
So here, it's a very good question, because really what's happening is that when in our society, where some people want to maintain power, and they, through greed or intimidation or authoritarian leadership, any kind of way, when our society where people want to maintain power, they want to make sure that any opposition to that power is upset. That's it. They want to stop it. So this emphasis on race, white race, brown race, people of color, Asians, all these things serve to partition the society and make people work against one another, and they identify with their race, their ethnicity or their race. But that's not where the emphasis should be, because the emphasis, and we as Muslims know, the emphasis has to be on recognizing that all human beings are subservient to the Almighty. So if we see what Allah reminds in the Quran, that those most favored in His sight are the ones that are most conscious of their duty, if we can recognize that characteristic in every human being, then their skin tone makes no difference, the language makes no difference. All these things are secondary. So if we can unite around a moral consciousness, if we had, for example, a national moral consciousness, based on a spiritual recognition of Allah, of God as Almighty. And I recognize that non-Muslims would refer to God or Jehovah. But the point that I'm making here is that if we understand that the Almighty is one, He created all of us, and we might see Him through different eyes, but from that we could identify and develop a national moral consciousness and make that the cornerstone of what we're trying to do. And all these little things that divide us would just eventually go away. So my recommendation would be to change the focus. Don't focus on blackness. Don't focus on whiteness. Don't focus on racism. Don't focus on Asian. Focus on spirituality. Focus on morality. Focus on those things that are pleasing to the Almighty.
Thank you, Doctor. That's an excellent note to end on. Jazakallah khair. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you back, inshallah.
You're very welcome, brother. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Back to you, Samana.
Thank you, Edward. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.